The life of Saint Francis de Sales. Francis was born at the castle of Sales in Savoie on August 21, 1567, the first child of Mr. and Mrs. Francois Boissy. He spent the early years in this place. The father of Francis took the young child with him when he went for hunting. Thus, Francis discovered the valleys and mountains of his beautiful country. His mother also took him when she went to visit the farms of the castle. Francis admired the beauty of nature. From his mother, he learned to thank God. He liked to build altars with flowers. He learned to pray with the children of the farmers. Francis was a sweet and affectionate child, but also curious and decisive about everything. Sometimes he was a handful. Once he stole as a prank the clothes of a passing guest. The cook also recounted that young Francis often went to the kitchen and hovered over the yummy pastries and would slip out with one that was still burning hot. His father remarked,
"Francis, my son, it is time for you to start school. Monsieur Diage, our chaplain, will teach you how to read."
Monsieur Diage was strict, but Francis liked him very much. Francis learned quite fast, and he read a lot. He was also in the company of an old lady, a family friend. By reading to her, he got to know the lives of the saints. When Francis was 6 years old, he was sent to a boarding school with his cousins in the village called La Roche, then to Annecy. He was called the Little Saint. Here he was well loved. A schoolmate would say,
"Francis, you can count on him. You know that our teachers were quite strict. Francis never hesitates to defend a classmate with him, taking the punishment in place of the other."
When Francis was 11 years old, he received the sacraments of First Communion and Confirmation. At this time, he already thought of becoming a priest. Since he belonged to a noble family, it was the father who chose his career.
"Francis is the eldest in the family. He will study law. When he becomes a lawyer, he can be a senator, and that will be an honor to the family."
When Francis was 15 years old, his father decided that he should study and should leave for Paris. Since he was young, his father asked Monsieur Diage, the tutor of Francis, to accompany him. Francis learned dancing, fencing, riding. He asked,
"Can I take the course of theology to know more about God?"
In Paris, Catholics and Protestants were arguing about the question on the foreknowledge of God.
Can we be truly sure about being with God all our life and after our death? Has God decided everything beforehand?
Francis felt so fragile before all this. He feared that in the end he might be far away from God in hell. He became sick. Here in Paris he was alone, without any person to whom he could talk. One day he went to a church and entrusted himself to the Virgin Mary. After that, he felt at peace. He has nothing to fear because God loves him. Neither will he forget that Mary always comes to the rescue of those who need her help. Francis passed the exams at the end of his studies. For some months he went home for his vacation in the castle. What a joy it was to see once again his mother and to play with his younger siblings who had grown up. Francis then left again to study law at the University of Padua, with Monsieur Diage accompanying him. He was not sure whether to reveal his desire to be a priest because he feared that his father would say no. At the university, Francis was brilliant. His companions found him too serious. They wanted to see him less so. They would invite him and say,
Ah, Francis, come with us. You never participate in the evening parties of the students, as we would be having this evening.
but he managed to stay away to pursue his dream. While studying law, he studied theology, and Monsieur Diage was his accomplice. In 1591, Francis obtained his doctorate in law with all the lavish words from the jury. His studies have ended. At home, it was expected that he would begin a brilliant career as a lawyer, one which he did not want. How could he tell them? Back home, his marriage was being arranged with a woman of nobility in the neighborhood. He was told,
Francis, this evening we will meet Madame Suchet de Muravel. It is time that we think of your marriage.
Francis politely replied,
I am not worthy of this young woman.
and so the plan was shelved. Francis was admitted as a lawyer at the Senate of Savoie. He left for Chambéry, where he would give his first speech. He was congratulated, and he was seen as an exceptional young man who is destined for great things. But Francis thought, what should I do in life? Francis was a good writer, but once on his return from Chambéry, was thrown off his horse. His sword slipped from the scabbard, and falling to the ground, the two objects formed a cross. At first, Francis did not give much importance to it, but it happened a second time, and then a third. And thus, Francis saw it as a confirmation of a call from God. He must do something about it. Francis confided in his cousin priest, who had an idea.
Francis, you have finished well your studies. Now, since your father had wanted you to have a good career, I will help you get an important position in the Church of Savoie.
Francis replied,
Most certainly not. I want to be a simple priest.
His cousin retorted,
You must accept it, because in this way your father will not be able to refuse you as a man of the church.
The bishop, Monsignor Granier, was now ready to make him his assistant. When Francis's father learned about it, he no longer knew whether to be angry or proud of his son, and finally gave Francis his permission to become a priest. Francis was ordained a priest on December 18, 1593. He was 26 years old. At his first Mass, people were heard saying,
Come, listen. Monsieur de Sales will address us at the cathedral. This will change our ideas. With this war that threatens, the Catholics of Annecy and the Protestants of Geneva are ready for anything.
In his sermon, Francis exclaims,
We must reconquer Geneva, but with love. Let us overthrow the walls of Geneva with our prayers and fraternal love. It is through our good example and not by force that we would inspire respect and confidence.
Francis loved to repeat to everyone without exception that they are loved by God. He took each occasion to speak at the cathedral. He spoke so simply, so encouraging, that more and more people, rich and poor, young and old, men and women, came to listen to him or to go to him to be reconciled with God. He said,
Our words must come out of the heart than out of the mouth. It may be said, the heart goes to the heart, and the mouth only goes to the ears.
The bishop asked for a priest to go to Thonon, which was very near Geneva. Francis volunteered to go. However, it was very dangerous. There it was forbidden to be Catholic, and the people were afraid. The only safe place was a fortress at Alange. The commandant accepted Francis to stay there. Once there, Francis traveled through routes and paths from village to village around Thonon. He would say,
If you see me enter a house, the people who welcome me are reported to the police. It is very dangerous for them. But on the road, we can always exchange a few words.
at times, Francis had bad experiences, risking his life in the forest that was infested with wolves. One evening, he had to take refuge in a large chestnut tree and spent the whole night waiting for help. With his belt, he tied himself to the tree for fear of falling if he fell asleep. In winter, Francis came home early so that he would not be overtaken by darkness, because the people refused to welcome him, even for just one night. One evening, he was forced to sleep in the still warm bread oven over the village, so as not to freeze to death. On Sundays, Francis spoke in the deserted churches, but the people were so afraid. He had an idea. He would write a message every week, and he would slip them through their doors. He remarked,
The people were curious, and at home there is no risk when they read what I have written.
At first, the soldiers at the fortress of Alange helped Francis copy the messages. But as Francis could contact about 100 families every week, he used modern means. The village of Chambéry was not very far, and they had a printing press. Thus was born the first weekly journal in history. That is why Saint Francis was chosen as the patron of journalists and writers. A year later, Francis dared to go down to Thonon to stay in the home of a friend of his family. But each day, in order to celebrate Mass, he had to go out of the village and cross the river Drance to reach the neighboring village of Publier. One winter day, the bridge collapsed. Francis had to cross the river. This was extremely difficult and dangerous. The mayor of Thonon was so impressed by his courage that he gave Francis a little chapel in the village. Francis was known for his calm and sweet demeanor. Once, a Protestant stopped him as he was going out after the Mass.
If I slap you, will you turn the other cheek?
Francis answered,
My friend, I know well what I must do, but I do not know what I will do because I am weak. Anyway, you may try.
Many were shocked by this scene that seemed to them an affront. Francis calmed them.
The first field of evangelization is our heart. The kingdom of God grows if it grows in us.
Francis often talked with the Protestants. He would often visit the head of the Church of Geneva, Theodore de Beze. He respected each person beloved of God, that he removed any violent reaction from his interlocutor, and each one was happy from the moment of dialogue, even if there were differences of opinion. Little by little, his friends in Thonon became more numerous, and Francis could celebrate the Mass in the very church where the Protestants were celebrating. Within 5 years, many inhabitants of Tonon and the surrounding villages asked to become Catholic like him. They felt loved by God, and they were not anymore afraid. Violence was never used. Here are words worth quoting.
Be gentle as you can. A spoonful of honey attracts more flies than 100 barrels of vinegar. You have to do everything with love, nothing with force.
Then, in 1599, Francis invited the bishop and the Duke of Savoy and organized a big feast. The church and the streets were decorated. The procession reached all villages and they were reunited. All the people were saying,
We have never seen anything so beautiful.
After 3 years, Monsignor Granier died. On December 8, 1602, Francis was consecrated bishop. Here is a conversation about the choice of place for consecration. He expressed his wish.
I would like the ceremony to be as simple as possible.
He was told,
As you wish, Monsignor, that it will be in the cathedral.
Francis continued,
No, Father, I wish that it would be in the village of Thoron.
The response to this,
At Thoron? But it is only a village.
Francis gave his reason.
I love that village. It is where I was baptized, and as a child I often went there with my mother.
Once ordained a bishop, Francis preached many times at the cathedral, but that was not enough. He decided to go to the country and the mountains of Savoy. It took him 3 years to visit all the villages, even the most far-flung. The journeys began on horseback and usually ended on foot. The country folk have never seen the bishop, this grand personage who moved for them.
It seems to me, Lord, that you are like the sun. You send to the smallest flower of the mountain, as to the mountain itself. You are Father of all.
On his return to Annecy, Francis always gave all he could to help the people. He organized 2 centers for distributing food to the poor every week. He often said,
Love of God and love of neighbor. These are the 2 loves where one cannot go without the other.
Francis welcomed everyone with respect, the valet, as well as the gentlemen.
I do not know how to distinguish between people. I see that all are clothed with the dignity of a Christian. The great occasions to serve God are rare, but the small ones are everyday.
Moreover, the bishop himself taught catechism to the children. They loved very much the stories that he told them. Everyone ran after him to embrace him when he passed through the roads of Annecy. Francis spoke so well of God that he was sometimes asked to stop in a city during his travels to give advice or to speak in the church on Sunday. A friend told Francis,
I know that you have written for many years to your cousin, Madame de Charmousset. She showed me your letters. What you wrote could help a lot of people. Make it a book. You have no right to keep this for yourself.
Francis accepted this and wrote a book, Introduction to the Devout Life. This is a great success because the simplest people discover how they can live with God and become holy where they are. And the following is a quote from the book.
Let's be what we are, and let's be good, to honor the master craftsman whose work we are.
In 1604, the inhabitants of Dijon welcomed the Bishop of Geneva. Everyone had heard about his talent in speaking to the people in the church, and all wanted to assist in the event. A young woman, Madame Jane Frances de Chantal, was so impressed by Francis that she sought to meet him after dinner and confided in him, "I am a widow. I have 4 children. I wish to be as close to God as possible and to give him all my life." Francis encouraged her. They would correspond and would become friends. Some years later, when Jane's children have become adults, Francis and Jane de Chantal founded the Congregation of the Visitation. Francis spent the little free time he had with the Sisters of the Visitation in order to give them precious advice. Most often, the sisters went to the garden and would sit among the plants around Francis and would ask him all the questions they wanted to ask. Francis would write a book for them, Treatise on the Love of God. In this book, he said,
Always be happy. He who has God in his heart will soon have him in all his actions.
Francis had to go back to Paris to close an alliance between the court of Savoy and the court of France. Peace was at stake. The negotiations took a long time, almost a year. The Parisians thus had the opportunity to hear him speak. He was appreciated by all. It was in this sojourn at Paris that he met the future saint, Vincent de Paul. Back in Annecy, Francis was continually loved by everyone, and his reputation for holiness had grown. They brought sick people to him for healing. He said,
These people admire me for healing them, but they did not notice that this poor woman said her Our Father, and it was the Lord, not me, who cured her.
Despite the advice of his doctor, Francis journeyed for a new diplomatic mission involving the Duke of Savoy and the King of France. That also allowed him to visit the Visitation nuns who have founded new houses. And when Francis had to stay for a month in Lyon, he preferred to stay in the house of the gardener of the nuns rather than the place offered him in the palace. It was here where his health worsened. He died on December 28, 1622.